Think we're ready to get things going, so I'll start the slides and let's kick this off. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Welfel, and welcome to the Resilience hosted webinar, Quantifying Cyber Risk for Strategic Business Alignment. I'm a senior cybersecurity engineer here at Resilience, and will be moderating today's session. We'll explore how Resilience's unique approach helps organizations make cyber risk by adding critical financial context and making it easier to prioritize initiatives based on real-world data and potential impact. You'll see our quantified cyber action plan, powered by the loss exceedance curve, supports better business decisions and strengthens collaboration and communication between technical experts and financial leaders. Today, you're in good hands, as you'll get to hear from a few of our experts. We've got Erica Lacey. She's a senior cybersecurity engineer at Resilience. Before joining Resilience, she served as a senior systems administrator at Lockheed Martin, specializing in IT infrastructure, automation to enhance and harden computer systems. She has over 10 years of industry experience and holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from Rowan University. We also have the director of data science at Resilience, Rob Mealy. He holds over a decade of experience as a machine learning engineer, researcher, and data science for organizations such as Fannie Mae, Snagajob, Sprinkler, and Red Owl. He obtained his master's in econometrics from Johns Hopkins University and his bachelor's in political science at St. Michael's College. And for the agenda today, now let's take a look at the areas we'll be focusing on. First, you will learn more about who Resilience is and our approach to cyber risk. Then Rob Mealy, the director of data science, will explain our unique approach to data modeling. Erica Lacey, the senior security engineer, will go into the mechanics of the loss exceedance curve, what it is, how it works, and how to use it. She will then touch on how the LEC, along with our cyber risk profile builder, informs a customized quantified cyber action plan to identify and prioritize cybersecurity program initiatives based on your financial risk impact. Erica will then close us out by sharing how this all leads to better alignment, collaboration, and communication between cyber experts and financial leaders, facilitating informed decision-making based on financial metrics. And finally, a quick housekeeping note. If anybody has any questions during the session, please ask them via the chat or the Q&A feature. We've reserved some time at the end to review at the end of the programming. So, who is Resilience? Let's first talk about some trends in cyber risk and what this means for our vision at Resilience. Worldwide losses due to cybercrime are rapidly increasing and creating a significant amount of risk for any organization operating in today's world. A cyber attack happens every 37 seconds on average, and Cybersecurity Ventures, a global publisher of cybersecurity research, is predicting that organizations around the globe will lose a cumulative $10.5 trillion due to cybercrime in 2025. Here at Resilience, we connect the risk quantification software that uses the same models and data that we use to underwrite cyber insurance policies, with cybersecurity experts and A+ insurance to help our clients be better able to avoid, and when avoidance is not possible, recover from cyber attacks with the least amount of impact. Nobody else does this. We can help you make better business decisions about where to focus your efforts and investments with an eye on reducing your losses as cost effectively as possible. In today's world, being able to take a hit and keep going is more important than not getting hit at all. And this is the LEC, which we will continue to hear a lot about today. It's a big part of how we help clients make better business decisions. We will help you identify which cyber investments can reduce the impact of cyber events in the most cost-effective way, whether that's more user training, new security tools, or a solid incident response plan, or dozens of other controls. Think return on investment. This is investment in effective loss prevention with measurable benefits. We will help your technical SMEs explain to the business leaders in business terms what the benefit of the new capability is. Yes, security folks, we can actually help you justify that solution you've been asking for who knows for how long. We will also help your business leaders understand and communicate to your board what they are getting for their cyber investment and be able to speak about it in familiar business terms. And I'm now going to pass this off to Rob Mealy, who will briefly walk through the motivation and general philosophical approach we take in building our risk assessment systems and models to solve our customers' problems. And then we'll give you a more detailed walkthrough of the actual solutions we have built and are building today.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, my name is Rob Mealy. I'm the Director of Data Science here at Resilience. And like Eric said, I'm going to give you sort of a philosophical overview, and then we're going to go into the details. So first, security professionals tend to deal in certainties, in my experience. Something is safely configured and sanely deployed, or it is not. MFA is required on all accounts, or it is not. From many perspectives in the enterprise, this may be good and correct. A vanguard security professional whose job it is to actively prevent, protect, and in the event, mitigate and contain should indeed be required to think this way, at least some of the time. This metaphor, one where the technical infrastructure and digital assets of an organization are a castle or a fortress, and the cybersecurity professionals the garrison troops, is a very common one in cybersecurity. The language of the fortress is that of walls. This is the obligatory ChatGPT image, by the way. The language of the fortress is that of walls and weapons, of attackers and defenders. This language can be motivating to those on the front lines and helpful in thinking about tactics and direct response. For those manning the gates and walking the high walls, so to speak, either they are protecting the perimeter or they are not. Now, metaphors are great. They can be very useful, but they can also harm as well as help, especially if they enforce a perspective or a parlance that limits action. Because if you zoom out all the way from those front lines to the essential perspective of a modern CISO, the logical conclusion of this metaphor is that every modern organization is under constant siege. So it's no wonder that many modern CISOs feel under siege. This metaphor is no longer useful at the level of the modern CISO, because technical infrastructure and digital assets are not, in reality, a fortress to defend. They are the critical assets of a business. And that business is also not a fortress. It is a business. They are also in reality not under siege, despite the persistent and continuous nature of many cyber threats. At least currently, there are no invading hordes. There are risks and threats. There are costs, losses, and liabilities. There are assets to inventory, programs to maintain, projects to plan, resource, and prioritize, and critically, stakeholders to effectively communicate with. There is a business to run. And the language of business is not that of walls and weapons or attackers and defenders. The language of business is that of risk and money. And that is what this tool is for, and what Erica will walk you through in a moment. The cyber threats we face today are not as straightforward to model as the risks in older lines of insurance, such as earthquakes and hurricanes. We know this, and we know that this is a core challenge of our business, but they do obey patterns. And with the right systems, the right experts, and the right data, we can stay ahead of dynamic risks, help keep our clients safe and resilient, and along the way, translate the work of the CISO and the security team as the whole into the language of the overall business, opening up collaboration and accountability and a host of other capabilities. And hopefully avoid them looking like this. This is a still from an explainer video on our platform that makes all the points I just did, but way funnier. So you should definitely check that out. So how do we do this? In order to translate the work of the security professional to the language of the business, we need to build tools that allow us to get a useful, accurate assessment of how much value the work of the security organization is to the overall business. This is especially challenging in cybersecurity because it is a seeming existential risk that by definition is a cost center to the business. The value to the organization is usually that which the security professionals successfully prevent or mitigate or contain. It is a value that shows up by not showing up in the black and white and red of a hypothetical balance sheet. The way that we as a data science organization at Resilience view this customer problem is as a decomposition into three distinct tasks. First, the customer needs to assess their risk. How bad can I expect the bad things how often can I expect the bad things to happen with things as they are? If the bad thing happens, how bad could it actually be? They need to quantify their risk. What are the ranges of potential outcomes in dollars and cents? They need to identify and mitigate the drivers of that risk. Can I do anything to make the bad things happen less? Can I do anything to make them less severe when they do happen? Now, we have some challenges and constraints in building tools to credibly and accurately and usefully perform those three tasks. First, we have data challenges. Now, our claims data, as well as our application and security scans and all our open source and proprietary and vendor data sources are detailed, invaluable, and we get all the value that we possibly can out of them. Nevertheless, it is difficult to build a data set of sufficient scale for each and every one of the risks we need to be able to say useful things about. Our claims data is our most reliable source of outcomes linked to concrete security profiles, and I'll return to that again and again later on in the presentation. But if it alone were large enough in size to train many traditional supervised machine learning algorithms for all of the distinct risks we believe our customers face, we would likely not be in business, no matter how much larger we are fortunate to grow. We also need our tools also need to be interpretable and explainable in order to usefully recommend and help prioritize work and resources in a way that can be tied to the financial bottom line of the business. We need to be able to explain in relatively simple terms what the main drivers of our assessments are. We have a shifting threat landscape. In my opinion, cybercrime is not an epidemic, it is endemic. It is a facet of the modern world in a very similar way to the flu and the weather, except it is driven by conscious, often but not always, profit-seeking human behavior. It will continue to shift and change, so we need systems and modeling approaches that will adapt and change with it as much as possible. And finally, quantification is hard. As I said before, the sort of negative or preventative nature of the value that the security organization adds is a sort of intuitive bubble or intuitive barrier often for sort of building the right kinds of tools to solve these problems. We also have lots of advantages. Our claims data is invaluable, and more on that later. But we can, like I said before, we can access publicly available proprietary and vendor data on the public-facing internet footprint of an organization, and our systems can, with clients' permission, incorporate myriad third-party assessments of the state of the internal systems, processes, and configurations. As part of the insurance application process, our prospective clients give us all the fundamental information we need to make our underwriting decisions. And then after they're our clients, we've been delighted to find that they're continuing to share additional information with us because they know and trust we're both keeping that information safe and using it relentlessly to make them stay resilient, to help them stay resilient. We also have an increasingly sophisticated user base. There's this old Henry Ford quote that if I'd listened to my customers, they'd asked for a faster horse or something. But the truth is that in our experience, some, not all, but some of our customers are asking us for cars, metaphorically. We partner with our clients to help them understand what their current most urgent vulnerabilities are and to support the business cases necessary to communicate with the rest of the organization. But we also partner with them on our modeling and our product development efforts, including in what risks matter most and how they're being observed in the wild. Also, we have a world-class team and demonstrable results. I'm not allowed to talk about all the details, but as an example, we've had threat intelligence work lead to the real-life unmasking and even potential apprehension of very bad cyber criminals. I could brag more, and of course I'm biased. But regardless, as you'll see, we choose our tools so that we can use this expertise to power our risk assessments directly, not just to run our business and work with our clients on our security and risk management. We also have very well-calibrated experts, which is a whole webinar on its own and a much nerdier one. So feel free to ask me offline about that and I'll talk your ear off. We also have aligned interests with our clients, and this really does matter. It seems like a squishy thing, but when a claim happens, we pride ourselves on our team's ability to help our clients through one of the most potentially difficult times in the history of their business. But we would also much rather not lose money, just like even when you finally are able, hopefully with our full support and help, to get back up and running after a serious incident, you'd so much rather just not have bothered to go through the whole thing at all. The more secure and resilient you are, the better it is for us and vice versa. This is why we use the same tools for our underwriting support and many other internal risk assessment tasks that we use to help support our clients' internal security decisions and programs. All of these things matter in building machine learning systems. Data is a reflection of human activity. Garbage in, garbage out, as the old saying goes. We'll return to that original decomposition of the problem above later, but another decomposition that's useful is of the task of assessing the frequency of any event occurring versus that of the event's potential severity. Some techniques model frequency, and frequency is how often will something happen? How often will the lightning strike? And severity is how much damage will that event cause? Some techniques model these jointly. We model them separately and combine those estimates together because composability is a key design objective of all of our machine learning systems, as it allows us to reuse efforts to support multiple use cases or business goals with the same set of shared tools. We'll start with inputs into both sides of this problem, which are our signals. Signals are the foundation of all of our modeling and risk management efforts. And Erica will go into more detail on this later, but we are very opinionated about our signals, and we manage their implementations and interpretations very carefully. Our tools handle missing data flexibly, and we can tell you something about your risk, no matter how much further context and information we have. But the more we know, the better our understanding of your risk, and so the better of your understanding, hopefully. Yes, and you can see, fill out your cyber profile builder, please. So now I'll give an overview of the approach we take to frequency estimation. That is to answering the problem of how often can I expect the bad things to happen. We use a machine learning tool, or one of the original AI tools actually, called Bayesian networks, part of a family of algorithms called graphical models. They're called this because one of the core building blocks of such a model is called a directed acyclic graph, or a DAG. That's what this is right here. And it's basically just a story, a graphical representation of the story of how a bad event or how a risk occurs in the real world. This is an example of a very simple network that a doctor might use to assess a patient's risk of cancer. Underneath, these are omnivorous, and they can be built from detailed supervised data sets, both structured and sort of overall distributions. They can be learned from expert elicitation processes, or crucially, some combination of both. They can also incorporate aggregated and macro level data and reports as priors on specific signals or outcomes, allowing for the flexible handling of missing data. A prior is a pre-existing belief or data about the distribution of a specific random variable or something similar that can then be updated via additional data or new information. Underneath the hood, underneath the hood, these models are this graph and some kind of probability distribution defined at each of these what are called nodes. And the probability distributions can look as simple as this, which is a conditional probability table, which here you can see it's essentially what is the probability of given someone's age, what is the probability of their exposure to toxins? And oh, it looks like they forgot Gen X again. That's a joke. Everyone always forgets Gen X. Trying to make a joke here. All right. So we use these models we use these models to sort of define useful abstractions of the types of threats that our clients face. We define two sort of primary sets of risk models. First are triggers. They're for assessing the likelihood of concrete first step bad outcomes that could plausibly lead to a financial loss. Examples include phishing, website outage attack, system failure, and security misconfiguration. Those models then serve as a flexible and adaptive base for our four core peril models, useful abstractions that we can meaningfully tie to how we observe real cyber losses in our claims and other experience. With these models, we can prioritize stability and business enablement alongside predictive performance. Our current set of peril models are business interruption, data breach, fraud, and extortion. Each of these models functions as a standalone risk assessment tool that can be productized on its own, but they also function as part of an overall risk assessment system, where if we can define units of work as groups of signals, e.g., for example, the MFA status across multiple systems, and then also use those signals to assess the likely impact of each specific potential MFA improvement on the specific risk it drives. For example, MFA on email accounts would reduce one's risk of a successful phishing attempt, where MFA on admin accounts for critical systems would reduce one's risk of a malicious credential reuse. But both initiatives could potentially be tracked in the same line item on the team budget. We use a structured, rigorous process to build our models, combining whatever we can learn directly from our many data sources with convened panels of world-class security and insurance experts, both internal and external where possible. And we guide those experts through efficient and structured conversations and advanced elicitation techniques to build the structure and learn the most appropriate probability distributions. Now back to severity. Just to really nail the point home, this is a further illustration of the difference between of the reason why it's important to understand both frequency and severity. The volcanoes in Hawaii's national park are, the frequency of eruptions is essentially continuous, but the severity is such that folks can just stand on the edge taking a picture. Whereas another volcano, Mount Tambora in Indonesia, has only erupted 3 times, but one of those eruptions caused what's called the year without a summer, right? So understanding what both how often an event is happening and also how severe that event is going to be are both very crucial to assessing these risks and performing these customer tasks. Here we do have a secret weapon, which is our claims data. Our claims team is very good. We have some of the top claims professionals in the world, but most importantly, they're integrated into our data and risk organization alongside me, our threat intelligence professionals, and all of the other folks who are tasked with monitoring and assessing and building the tools to manage both our risk and our customers' risk. They have the right second and third priorities. Obviously, they support our clients going through the worst events of their business first, but they also collect careful data and nuanced understandings of where the money goes. So that enables our nuanced impact modeling, so we can understand, as well as, we can understand where, how, and why the money goes when those worst cases occur. All of this. So the goal is for all of our learnings and the findings and structured and semi-structured data our claims professionals collect in their work, along with the work of our security services and client success and underwriting professionals like Erica and many others, to inform not just our clients' direct risk assessment, but continually inform our risk models and all of the other sort of active risk assessments that we're doing. Our models are the marriage of the high quality data and the thought and discussion of some of the best qualified security experts around. And they're absolutely important intellectual property and a key foundation for how we solve your problems. But they will continue to grow and change and be added to as our understandings of the risks grow and change, to reflect all that work and learning, to keep our models and so our risk assessments and so our clients resilient to as much of the world of cyber threats we face as possible. Our systems let us scale our expertise and data and build rapid feedback loops that keep information from getting lost or siloed. So, returning to that original decomposition of the task of the client, we use our foundation of Bayesian network models to assess the frequency of bad outcomes, starting with a foundation of initial, more technical trigger models that feed up into a set of peril models. Those peril probabilities are then combined with a severity estimate based on our claims data into a tool that allows us to develop an understanding of what the likelihood of different specific bad financial outcomes are for the organization. And because these are all tied back to signals, and those signals, especially those representing processing controls, can be tied to projects and initiatives, which can then those can then be used to more fully understand the value those projects and initiatives represent to the organization. And now Erica will tell you how to actually use this tool to support decision-making and organizational communication in reality, because she helps our clients actually do that in their day-to-day, every single day. So take it away, Erica.
So like Rob mentioned, our models simulate 4 core cyber perils, and these are the ones that we most often see result in financial losses. They're business interruption, extortion, data breach, and fraud. But now that we actually have these models, how do we turn all of that data into something meaningful, not just for security professionals, but for them to share with their leadership or board as well? So that's where the loss exceedance curve comes in, or what you might hear us refer to as the LEC. The LEC here helps us answer 2 critical questions. The first one is, how likely are cyber losses to occur within a 3-year period? The second question is, if they do happen, how much could it cost? So that is the frequency and severity that Rob described earlier. This concept of an LEC actually comes from the insurance industry. It's used to measure catastrophic risks. But the curve itself actually visualizes risk in 2 dimensions. So along the x-axis there, that's the potential financial loss. And then over the y-axis, this is the probability of that loss occurring. So you can see in the example we're looking at here, this client has a 24% probability of a loss exceeding $500,000 and a 14% loss of exceeding $1 million. So as you move down this curve, as the cost of losses increase, the probability decreases. So what does this actually mean for cybersecurity investment decisions? Well, when we add security controls, we typically reduce the height of a curve. So meaning we lower the probability of having a costly incident. So now in our example here, we've added a second line that represents this organization's risk after implementing a specific set of security controls. So we've brought down their risk here of having a loss of 500K by 11%. Additionally, on the LEC, we like to highlight 3 key risk thresholds for customers. The first one is the probability of a significant loss, which is defined as anything over 250K. The second is the probability of exceeding insurance coverage. This helps our clients understand any potential gaps. So anything to the left of this dotted line is risk that's been transferred onto their insurers, and anything to the right is accepted risk, or essentially the amount that the business would need to self-fund if a major event were to occur. And then Rob referred to this earlier as the tail risk. It's the probability of an extreme loss. This is the worst plausible case scenario. It's the 99.7th percentile, or you can think of this as a 1 in 1,000 year event. And while they can be rare, we do see 2 to 3 of these claims come in each year, and it's absolutely a scenario that should be considered. So additionally, within the platform, we break down our client's risk by those 4 perils that we talked about earlier. And this is the overall risk associated with each peril, not the likelihood of each peril's occurrence. But this can actually help the client just get a very high level understanding on what type of security initiatives they may want to prioritize. So a quick example here, when we first start working with our clients, one of the things we love to ask them is, what keeps you up at night? What are you most concerned about? And we had a client that was particularly concerned about data breach. They were actively working on several initiatives to strengthen their data security. But after working with us, getting their data into the platform and taking a look at the LEC and the peril breakdown, they actually realized that business interruption accounted for more than half of their overall risk. So they were able to redirect some of those efforts, because certainly data security is important, but they were able to redirect some of those efforts toward improving recovery so that in the future they could minimize downtime and financial impact if an event did occur. So ultimately, the accuracy of these projections depends on the quality of the data. The more precise the input, the more meaningful the LEC becomes. So how do you quantify your cybersecurity roadmap? Well, now that we have an understanding of the loss exceedance curve, how it helps you visualize risk, the next logical question is, what can we actually do about it? And that's where the quantified cyber action plan comes in. And this is where our signals that Rob mentioned play a critical role as well. So what are signals again? Signals are data points that capture details about a client's organization and security posture. They include things like security controls, policies that are currently in place, firmographic data like industry, size, and revenue, infrastructure complexity. And as of right now, we're actually tracking over 400 signals within our models, and about half of which we gather this information from clients through our cyber risk profile builder. And this is actually a screenshot of our future design of the cyber risk profile builder. But A number of these signals are often already pre-filled based on data that we collect through the client's insurance application. Many other signals come from publicly available information. And then we also have signals populated through integrations in the platform. Some of these that we have right now are AWS M365 and Zscaler. There's also a couple others coming in the future. But the integrations are actually one of my favorite ways that we collect signals because they allow us to provide quantified recommendations on very specific security configurations, so we can turn that raw data into something more actionable. So coming back to the cyber action plan, or you might hear me refer to it as the QCAP, this QCAP takes all of the signals and translates it into a list of controls or initiatives that a client can implement to reduce their financial risk. So essentially, I talked earlier about lowering that LEC. It's these items that lower the curve. So here's an example of a cyber action plan. The first column that you see there is going to list the name of whatever control or initiative the client could implement. And then I want to highlight this second row because this second row shows a dollar amount, and this represents the estimated reduction on the organization's extreme loss exposure if that control were to be implemented. So if we dig in a little deeper, you can click on any of these recommendations. And you'll see at the bottom there, it will list any of those contributing signals or data points and what their current state is. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see that extreme loss reduction dollar amount I mentioned on the previous slide. And then in the middle here, we give clients the opportunity to add an estimated cost. And the estimated cost should include implementation, operation, and maintenance over a 3-year period. And then on the rightmost side here, from there, we can calculate a very key metric, and that's the return on extreme loss reduction. This is essentially how much risk reduction an organization gets for every dollar invested on this control. So once a client has added some estimated cost in, it's actually that return on extreme loss reduction that you'd want to use to prioritize which controls to implement. And that's a crucial last step in the process. It's how clients can actually inform their current cyber roadmap to ensure they're getting the most value out of their spend. And this also helps customers not only understand which investments they should be making, but also the ones that they might not want to invest in. There is very likely items on the list that, given their costs, it just doesn't make sense for the organization to implement this control, at least at this time. So why does all this matter? By leveraging CRQ, or cyber risk quantification, we're going to move away from those subjective security recommendations and also the compliance checklists, which certainly have their place, but instead we're providing data-driven investment decisions, and they're aligned with business objectives. And this allows clients to optimize their cybersecurity spend and also continue to make improvements in their risk posture. So bringing it all around, now that we've covered quantifying risk, visualizing it, how we identify ways to reduce it, we're going to talk about another common challenge we see, and that's getting cybersecurity and finance on the same page. We often see security teams are focused on vulnerabilities, controls, threats. Finance is usually more concerned with budgets and return on investment, financial exposure. So because the two speak these different languages, it can be hard to connect those cybersecurity spending to business priorities. So our goal with cyber risk quantification is to help change that conversation between the two. So CRQ gives these two groups a common way to talk about cyber risk, and it aligns security teams, not just with finance, but also with risk managers, so that we're all working toward the same goal. It's going to support better decision-making with clear financial data, and it's going to make those security discussions more strategic. We're not just talking about which vulnerabilities we're fixing, et cetera. So by using the tools that we have, the LEC and the QCAP, security teams are not only going to be able to show their financial leadership what the financial impact is of cyber risk in dollars and cents, but they're also going to be able to demonstrate the effect of security improvements, what's already been done and how it reduced risk, and help executives weigh future investments, showing them how different security initiatives can lower their financial risk. So with some of the more mature security teams that we work with, often we see their planned roadmap going into the engagement lines up pretty closely with what they see in the QCAP, which is great. They already know exactly how each initiative will make the organization more secure. But when it comes time to requesting funding, finance teams are often hesitant to approve budget because they don't fully understand the impact of those initiatives like the security professionals might. So one of my favorite moments when working with clients is seeing that sort of aha moment when they realize that this is the data they needed to make their case, especially in organizations that haven't experienced a major cyber incident. There's often this mindset of, oh, that can never happen to us. But the reality is, and I think Rob said this earlier, or Rob or Eric said this earlier, that it's really a matter of when and not if. So by showing some actual financial impact on those security investments, not just in technical terms, but in those dollars and cents, finance teams start to understand what's at stake, or rather their value at risk. And because these numbers are backed by real claims data and regularly validated with that data, they can trust them. And like Rob said, our interests are aligned, because if our risk models are wrong, we end up being the ones that have to write a check too. So at the end of the day, cybersecurity is not just a technical issue, it's absolutely a business issue. And when security and finance teams can speak the same language, organizations can make smarter decisions, they can get more value from their cybersecurity investments, and ultimately reduce financial risk in a way that makes sense to everyone within the organization. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Eric to facilitate any questions.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Eric and Rob, for going over how risk quantification works here at Resilience and how we provide critical financial context for our clients to make informed business decisions. Now let's review some of the questions that came in during the presentation. Folks, feel free to add any additional questions to the chat or the QA feature as we're going through these. Firstly, I want to address Ryan in the chat. Thank you so much for the feedback on the improvements that you suggested to the signal statuses, being able to simulate some of the on and off statuses of these signals to see how it affects your risk quantification. And then I have a question for Rob. With respect to Bayesian networks, you talked about priors for missing data. Can you explain what that with the cancer example and with a cybersecurity example?
Sure. Yeah, let me bring us back to that diagram here. So basically you can look at this as, like I said before, this is a simple network model that a doctor might use to assess the patient's risk of cancer, right? And you can see here that a patient's risk of cancer is modeled as a function of their exposure to toxicity or toxins, and whether or not they're a smoker. Now, if you don't know these two things, this model says that if you don't know these two things exactly, specifically about a patient, you can know something about the likelihood of their exposure to toxins and whether or not they're a smoker, based on whether or not you know their age and gender. So basically, this is a way to sort of build a model of sort of putting information from the real world into the context of how a risk is happening, how the mechanisms of how a risk is happening, so you can assess the likelihood of that risk. So for as a cybersecurity, so what, specifically for priors, if we don't know, if we only know what someone, what someone's gender and we don't know their age, we can, but we know, for instance, that we know sort of the summary statistics of the ages. So we know that, sort of Zoomers represent, I don't know, 20% of the population. Gen Z represents whatever, so we know the percentage of these population. We can actually have essentially a prior on this signal, so that we can sort of like basically assume the likelihood of someone's age as being the same as the likelihood of picking a random person out of the sort of population of everyone, if that makes sense. So we can essentially use information that we know about sort of everyone else. And this, for as an example, we can this is, as a concrete cybersecurity example, imagine that this is sort of assessing the risk of a phishing attempt, right? And you could imagine that these are phishing control, these are sort of like how many emails, sort of like the volume of email that your organization sends, or sort of like the number of, just sort of the size of your organization. And this could be sort of or some kind of controls that you have in place, email controls that you have in place, right? And let's say, so for instance, let's say, this could be whether or not you have DMARC enabled, right? And if you don't answer that question for us, whether or not you have DMARC enabled, but we know that 70% of organizations have DMARC enabled and 30% of organizations don't in the real world, and you've answered a whole bunch of other questions for us, that sort of using those priors lets us assume sort of like the same thing about your organization that we would assume about any random organization for information we don't know, and lets us sort of update that information with the specific data points of your risk assessment, for the information that we do. I don't know if that makes sense fully, but that's the answer.
Thank you, Rob. And an additional question to follow up. Do we attempt to model and quantify third-party perils like contingent business impact?
That's a great question. Yes, in fact, that is it. So right now, currently, all of our perils are first party, but we are actually very, very far along in an effort to sort of fully model third party risk in a myriad of different ways, starting with vendor risk and going up, sort of through, starting with vendor risk, but also looking at sort of different formulations of that kind of problem. And yes, so we're the sort of medium term goal is to sort of have standalone tools that model contingent business interruption and contingent data breach, where we can sort of, build those risk assessments and work with our clients. But then eventually we would definitely like to have the plan is to have those sort of rolled up into our overall perils, as well as other perils, like potentially sort of, folks, and that will allow us to sort of, that will allow an organization to manage all of those risks together in the same LEC. So yes, that is actually, I'm glad that question was asked, because it's coming down the pipe fast. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Erica, I'm going to throw a few questions your way now. How would you recommend using the combination of the Cyber Profile Builder and the QCAP to help prioritize? And do I need to change signal values in order to understand their impact, or can I simulate that in the QCAP?
Okay, so in terms of how to use Cyber Risk Profile Builder and QCAP to prioritize, always the QCAP should be what's used to prioritize controls. The Cyber Risk Profile Builder is just so that you get all those items that you possibly could implement into that QCAP. Now, we'll ask the second question again, Eric. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Do I need to change signal values in order to understand their impact, or can I simulate that in the QCAP?
Yeah, so currently there isn't any way to actually simulate. It's something that we're considering. However, in that new, I had a screenshot in there of the new, let me see if I can find it real quick. Cyber Risk Profile Builder. And the new one is actually going to show you which signals have a higher impact on the model. Yeah, here it is. I can hardly say it, but it'll show you which ones have a high impact, which ones are associated with a cyber action plan item, so that you can kind of prioritize which signals to fill out, especially for those most clients are pressed for time. So this is kind of to help break it down a little further and get you in there filling out those signals. So the simulation part isn't coming yet, but you will be able to get some idea of how the signal is going to impact the model before you adjust it.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to have a question back to Rob. Beyond the presence of the control through questionnaire, how do you think about weighting the risk on the implementation of the control/capability being appropriately deployed?
That is a great question. And actually, I was sort of trying to touch on that without going into too much technical detail when I was talking about how we manage the implementation and interpretations of our signals. But you can actually see in this screen that Erica's sharing right now a little bit of sort of our future state plans for additional nuance and additional sort of but basically the way that we do that is we try to define, we sort of define our data, we do sort of define our raw data collection, we sort of build our raw data collection capabilities such that we obviously have all access to as much information as possible in its raw state, but we define what we call our signals to sort of capture exactly the kinds of nuance that you are talking about. And we also have sort of versions of our signals based on how much information that we know, or we're basically so we can have sort of a simple yes, no, do you have MFA or not, right? If we know the answer to, if that's all that we know the answer to. But if we actually know the answer to the specifics of your MFA implementation, for instance, whether or not you're using a YubiKey versus or whatever, versus sort of just SMS based, right? Which are very different in terms of their actual effectiveness. We want to know that information, and we do incorporate that level of more level of granular detail when we know about it. And there was another question actually in terms of how do we keep up with new features and products. The question is, how do we keep up with new features and products that go to market and aspire to solve issues? For example, most organizations are struggling to secure deployment of generative AI, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of cybersecurity or AI companies. Does your service help us shortlist these clients? So we do work currently right now. We do not claim to sort of help our clients assess the relative value of one vendor versus another, but we do have opinions about vendors, and we do have opinions about controls. We do have opinions, and those opinions come from our data and from our experiences. And so we're there. And the other way that we keep up with our risks and sort of the additional information is that we have these rapid feedback loops of rebuilding and retraining our models, updating our understandings, the understandings our risk assessments have in a variety of different ways. And so really the way that we keep up is those rapid feedback loops and sort of continually trying to just sort of being vigilant. We have a threat intelligence team whose job it is really to tell me what we should be looking at and what we should be modeling. That's not their only job. That's their job from my perspective. They have a much bigger job than that, but that's what they do for me. And so we also, like I said, we work with our clients, and we are obsessively diligent about trying to maintain that type of perspective. We sort of take an intelligence service approach to the way we model our risk, if that makes sense.
And I just want to follow it up with a quick plug for our risk intelligence team and their the articles that they publish within our platform. I know AI has been such a hot topic over the last couple of years, and they've heard that, and they've published several AI related articles in there, but now they're actually doing a regular monthly update with generative AI. So definitely check those out.
Thanks, Erica and Rob. Erica, are you able to provide any insight into what's in the pipeline for the Resilience platform?
Yeah, so one of the things that Rob had mentioned, the modeling vendor risk, that's a big one. The other one is board reporting. So right now we're working on an initiative to try and summarize a lot of this information that we get in the platform and some additional information, and try and get that into a buildable slide deck that customers can use and then share with their board or executive leadership. And it's also going to go through and kind of give some guidance on how to explain this to that leadership. So that's one we're really looking forward to. The other one is being able to model companies that have several subsidiaries and showing sort of like an aggregate risk view. So those are a couple of things we're working on that we're pretty excited about this year.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. One more question that came in. Do our models map to any existing maturity frameworks such as ISO 27001, NIST 853, NIST CSF 2.0, those kind of things?
I think either of us can answer this one, but
Yeah.
Eric.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we internally do have mappings to a lot of different frameworks. We don't currently expose those to clients. We use them. We use security frameworks as part of the foundations for all of our modeling work. They're incredibly useful, and we also want to use them to map. We know that clients use them to sort of track their work, and so there's definitely a lot of product discovery and discussions around actually exposing our understandings of how our models map to frameworks and sort of leveraging that in a variety of different ways. That's currently in pretty early stages, but it's definitely something we're sort of actively working towards. One of the many roadmap items that we're trying to work towards. But yes, it is definitely something that we're working towards.
Thanks, Rob. And one more follow-up question. For someone just starting with risk quantification with nearly zero experience, in the idea of risk quantification, how would they get started? How should they get things going if they've never really worked with risk quantification?
So I actually think that there's a book called How to Measure Anything and another book called How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk by actually our former CISO, Rich Seierson, who's a great guy and has done a lot of work in this area with Douglas Hubbard, his co-author. And that book sort of gives a very it gives a very not just entry level, but it gives a very sort of like an easy access point into the sort of concepts that we're working with, and also gives you a lot of access to sort of the very simple versions of the tools that we're using to do the work, the quantification that we're doing. You can sort of build your own versions of those tools, and they give you access to those tools, access to tools that are not, they're not sort of doing the same, they're not doing exactly the same things that we're doing, but they're essentially analogs, and you can build a lot of your own tools to answer other business problems and stuff. I definitely recommend those two books. And again, How to Measure Anything and How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk. And then also, yeah, I think there are also we can definitely share other resources. I don't have any others off the top of my head, but
This webinar might be a great start.
yeah.
All right. Well, Rob and Erica, thank you so much for answering your questions and running through those slides. And everyone, thank you so much for joining today and talking about risk quantification and how resilience handles that. I just have a final heads up. We've got 2 resilience webinars coming up. Cyber Resilience 202 covering modern MFA bypass techniques, specifically Evil Engine X attacks with Sivan Sarkosian. That's Tuesday, March 11th from 11 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time. And secondly, the 2024 Cyber Risk Wrap-Up webinar, which will review the findings of our mid-year 2024 Cyber Risk Report and explore how those previously discussed trends evolved into the second half of the year. We also provide insights into the latest cyber claims and what we expect for 2025. That's on Tuesday, March 25th, 2025. We'll include sign-up links for these webinars in the follow-up email after this presentation, and we'll also drop them in this Zoom chat. Resilience clients can also sign up for these directly through the Resilience platform. Thank you, everyone, for attending today, and we'll catch you soon.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone.